The sky above Zelos Prime burned red as enemy ships rained fire from the heavens. Elder Vextar pressed his long fingers against the window of the council chamber and watched his peaceful world die. Buildings that had stood for 1,000 years crumbled into dust. Gardens where his people had grown their food turned into smoking craters. "How many ships do they have?" he asked without turning around. Young Nixara checked her scanner one more time, hoping the numbers had changed. They had not. 230 Korthak vessels, Elder. They keep coming through the jump gate. Vextar closed his eyes. His people had never known war. For 10,000 years, the Zelani had lived in peace. They grew food, built beautiful cities, and studied the stars. They had no weapons that could fight ships in space. Their few defense vessels were already gone, destroyed in the first attack. "What about the other worlds?" Vextar asked. "Have any of our colonies survived?" "Zelos 3 fell this morning," Nixara said, her voice breaking. "The mining station at Zelos 7 went dark an hour ago. Elder, we are the last." Through the window, Vextar could see another transport ship lifting off from the city. It carried 1,000 Zelani refugees, families fleeing their dying world. But where could they go? The Korthak Empire had been expanding for years, taking world after world. They enslaved peaceful species and stripped planets bare. "How long until they land ground troops?" Vextar asked. 6 hours, maybe less, Nixara replied. "They're landing. Ships are already in the upper atmosphere." Vextar turned away from the window. As the eldest member of the council, it was his duty to save what remained of his people. But what could he do? The Zelani had friends among the peaceful races, but none of them had armies. None of them could stand against the Korthak war machine. Then he remembered something. Years ago, the council had built a long-range communication array. It could send messages across the galaxy, reaching species they had never met. It was meant for science, for learning about distant worlds. "Nixara," he said slowly, "can you broadcast a message on all frequencies, as far as our transmitter can reach?" The young Zelani looked confused. "Yes, Elder, but who would hear it? We know of no species in that direction who could help us." "I do not know either," Vextar said, "but perhaps someone is listening. Perhaps someone will care that a peaceful people are about to die." They walked quickly through the corridors of the council building. Emergency lights flashed red as the building's systems warned of incoming attacks. Other council members rushed past them, carrying data crystals and art treasures, trying to save what they could of Zelani culture. The communication center was nearly empty. Most of the technicians had already evacuated. Only old Kiveth remained at his station, his 6 arms working quickly to keep the transmitter running despite the bombing. "Kiveth," Vextar called, "I need you to send a message. Broad spectrum, maximum power." "Where, Elder?" Kiveth asked. "Everywhere," Vextar said, to anyone who might be listening. Kiveth's large eyes widened, but he nodded. His arms danced over the controls and the great transmitter began to hum with power. "Ready, Elder." Vextar stood before the transmitter and spoke, knowing these might be the last words his species ever sent to the stars. "This is Elder Vextar of the Zelani people. We are a peaceful species on the world called Zelos Prime. We have never harmed another living being. We grow food, we create art, we study the beauty of the universe. Today our world dies. The Korthak Empire attacks us with hundreds of ships. We have no weapons to fight them. We have no armies to defend ourselves. In a few hours, our cities will burn and our people will be enslaved or killed. We do not ask you to fight for us. We only ask that you remember us. We ask that you give shelter to our refugees, to the few ships that may escape. We were a good people. We loved peace. We loved life. Please, if there is anyone out there who values such things, help our children find safety among the stars." The message went out, racing through space at the speed of light, spreading in all directions. Vextar did not know if anyone would hear it. He did not know if anyone would care. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space the Zelani had never explored, the message reached a small blue world. The beings there called it Earth. Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing patrol reports aboard the UES Titan when Communications Officer Lisa Grant looked up from her station with a puzzled expression. "Captain," she said, "I'm picking up some sort of transmission. It's not from any human ship." Morrison felt his heart skip a beat. In all of human history, they had never received a message from another species. They had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. "Put it on speakers," Morrison said. The bridge fell silent as they listened to the alien voice. The ship's computer worked to translate the message, turning alien words into English. When it finished, Morrison stared at the screen in shock. "Lisa," he said quietly, "patch me through to Admiral Blake immediately." Within minutes, Admiral Susan Blake appeared on the main screen. She was aboard the UES Guardian, leading a small fleet on training exercises near the edge of human space. "Jake," she said, "Lisa tells me you've received an alien transmission." "Yes, Admiral. A distress call. An entire species is under attack." Blake was quiet for a long moment. Morrison could see other ship captains appearing on smaller screens. As they joined the conference, Captain Tony Rivera from the UES Ranger, Captain Kate Phillips from the UES Thunder, a dozen other commanders. "How far away are they?" Blake asked. "About 2 weeks at maximum jump speed," Morrison replied. "Do we know anything about the attackers?" "Only that they call themselves the Korthak Empire, and they have over 200 ships." Captain Rivera laughed, but there was no humor in it. 200 ships, Admiral. We have, 12 heavy cruisers and 30 destroyers? These aliens might be asking us to commit suicide." "Maybe," Blake said, "but they might also be asking us to do what's right." The conference channel was quiet. Every human commander knew what this meant. They would be making first contact with alien species. They would be announcing humanity's presence to the galaxy. And they might be flying into a battle they could not win. "I want opinions," Blake said. Captain Phillips spoke first. "Admiral, we swore an oath to protect innocent life. These aliens say they're peaceful, that they've never hurt anyone. If we can help them, we should." "Even if it means war with this Korthak Empire?" Rivera asked. "Especially then," Phillips replied. "What kind of species attacks peaceful people? What kind of galaxy allows it?" Other voices joined in. Some argued for caution, for sending a small scout force first. Others wanted to go in with everything they had. Finally, Blake raised her hand for silence. "We're going," she said. "All of us. If there are innocent people dying out there and we have the power to help them, then we help them. That's what humans do." Morrison felt a surge of pride. This was why he had joined the Earth Defense Fleet. This was what humanity was meant for. "All ships," Blake continued, "begin jump preparations. We leave in 6 hours, and God help anyone who stands in our way." As the conference ended, Morrison looked out at the stars and wondered what they would find when they reached Zelos Prime. He wondered if 12 human ships could make a difference against 200 alien ones. He was about to find out why the galaxy would soon call Earth a death world. The message from the unknown species arrived at Zelos Prime just as the last transport ships were leaving orbit. Nixara stared at her communication screen in disbelief. Someone had answered their call for help. "Elder Vextar," she called across, the emergency bunker where the surviving council members had taken shelter. "We have received a response to our distress signal." Vextar hurried to her station, his robes torn and dusty from the bombing above. "What do they say?" Nixara translated the alien words carefully. "They call themselves humans. They say they are sending a peacekeeping force to assist us. They want to know our exact location and the strength of the attacking forces." "Peacekeeping force?" Vextar repeated the strange words. In 10,000 years of Zelani history, they had never needed such a thing. "How many ships are they sending?" "They do not say, Elder. But they ask about acceptable casualty rates and orbital bombardment procedures." A chill ran through Vextar's body. These humans spoke of death and destruction as easily as the Zelani spoke of growing flowers. "What kind of species are they?" Before Nixara could answer, another message arrived. This one was different. The translator struggled with words that had no meaning in peaceful Zelani culture. Terms like tactical advantage, enemy elimination, and collateral damage. Elder, Nixara said, her voice shaking. I think these humans are warriors. On the other side of the galaxy, the human fleet prepared for their first contact with alien species. Aboard the UES Titan, Commander Ryan Hayes worked with Dr. Amy Foster to understand the Zilani language better. Their sentence structure is completely different from ours, Dr. Foster said, studying the alien transmissions. But more interesting is what they don't have words for. No terms for military ranks, weapons systems, or battle tactics. Maybe they just translate poorly, Hayes suggested. No, I don't think so. Look at this. Dr. Foster pointed to her screen. They have 50 different words for types of peace, but only one word that could mean conflict, and it refers to disagreeing about which flowers to plant. Hayes frowned. Are you saying they've never had wars? I'm saying they might not even understand what war is. In the ship's armory, Marine Colonel Jack Turner was having his own problems. His men were preparing for combat against an unknown enemy, but they had no idea what to expect. Sir, Sergeant Nicole Ward said as she checked her rifle. What do we know about these Korthak things we're fighting? Nothing, Turner replied honestly. We don't know how big they are, how strong they are, or what kind of weapons they use. Hell, we don't even know if they breathe the same air we do. What about the aliens we're helping? Private Ben Clark asked. Turner shrugged. They seem peaceful, too peaceful maybe. They keep apologizing for bothering us and asking if we're sure we want to help. Down in engineering, Chief Maria Santos was pushing the ship's engines harder than ever before. The human fleet was traveling at maximum jump speed, racing across the galaxy to reach the battle in time. How are the weapon systems? Captain Morrison asked as he visited the engine room. All green, Captain, Santos replied, though I'm worried about what we'll find when we get there. The aliens keep asking us strange questions. Strange how? They want to know if we plan to take prisoners. They seem shocked that we have weapons that can destroy entire ships, and they keep asking if we're sure we want to risk our lives for people we've never met. Morrison nodded. He had noticed the same thing. The Zilani seemed amazed that humans would travel across the galaxy to help strangers. To them, it appeared to be an incredible act of kindness. To the humans, it was simply the right thing to do. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter was dealing with the political consequences of humanity's first contact with aliens. The United Nations was in emergency session, and every government wanted to know what the military was planning. Madam President, General Frank Miller said during a secure video call, some of our allies are concerned about the precedent we're setting. If we help these aliens, we might be dragging Earth into galactic conflicts. General, Carter replied firmly, if there are galactic conflicts, we're already involved whether we like it or not. Better to choose our side based on our values. And if we lose? Carter looked at the latest reports from the fleet. Admiral Blake had sent updates on their progress and their attempts to communicate with both alien species. The Zilani were grateful, but seemed terrified of human military capabilities. The Korthak had responded to diplomatic overtures with threats and demands for surrender. Then we lose fighting for something we believe in, Carter said. Meanwhile, in the Korthak fleet around Zelos Prime, Fleet Commander Vorthak was growing annoyed with the constant messages from unknown aliens claiming they were coming to help. The Zilani. What do we know about these humans? He asked his intelligence officer. Nothing, Commander. They appear to be from an unexplored region of space. Our databases have no record of their species. Vorthak laughed. Probably some minor species with a few patrol boats. Let them come. We will add their worlds to the Empire after we finish here. His confidence was shared by the rest of the Korthak fleet. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved countless species. No one had ever successfully challenged their military. But as the hours passed, strange reports began to come in from Korthak intelligence ships at the edge of the system. The approaching human fleet was larger than expected, and their ships were broadcasting signals that made no sense. Commander, the communication officer called out. The humans are sending us a message. What do they want? They are offering us one chance to withdraw peacefully from Zelos Prime. They say if we do not leave within 6 hours, they will force us to leave. The bridge of the Korthak flagship fell silent. Then Vorthak began to laugh. Soon his entire crew was laughing with him. "How many ships do they have?" he asked when he could speak again. 12 large vessels and maybe 40 smaller ones, Commander." "And they think 50 ships can defeat our fleet of 200? Vorthak wiped tears from his eyes. "Send a message back. Tell them they have amused us, but now they should run home before we decide to follow them." The human response came back immediately. "It was short and simple. We gave you a chance." Vorthak was still laughing when the first human ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zelos system. His laughter died when his sensors showed him what they were facing. The human ships were unlike anything in Korthak databases. They bristled with weapons that registered energy signatures off the scale. Their armor was thicker than Korthak battleships, and they moved with impossible speed and precision. "Commander," his tactical officer said, his voice shaking, "I'm reading power levels that should be impossible for ships that size." Vorthak stared at the display. Each human ship showed enough firepower to challenge 10 Korthak vessels, but that couldn't be right. No species built ships like that. No species needed to. "Sir," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving another message from the humans." "What do they say?" "They want to know if we've decided to leave peacefully. They also want to inform us that they consider targeting civilian populations to be a war crime." War crime. Another phrase that didn't translate well into Korthak. The Empire took what it wanted and killed anyone who resisted. That was how conquest worked. But these humans seemed to think there were rules for fighting. Vorthak was beginning to understand that they were not dealing with a normal species. These humans came from somewhere far away, somewhere the galaxy had never seen before, and they were about to teach the Korthak Empire what real warriors looked like. "All ships," he ordered, "prepare for battle. Show these humans what happens to those who challenge the Empire." He had no idea that he was about to meet beings who had evolved on a world so dangerous that merely surviving childhood made them tougher than the galaxy's most feared soldiers. The moment the human fleet appeared at the edge of the Zelos system, every sensor array in the galaxy seemed to turn their way. This was not just another minor skirmish between small species. Something new had entered galactic space, and it carried weapons that should not exist. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the UES Guardian and watched her tactical display update with new information. 230 Korthak ships surrounded the dying world of Zelos Prime. Orbital bombardment platforms fired continuously at cities below. Refugee ships fled in all directions, many already damaged by enemy fire. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander, Ben Clark said from his scanner station, "I'm reading massive civilian casualties on the surface. They're targeting hospitals, schools, food distribution centers." Blake's jaw tightened. In human military doctrine, such targets were strictly forbidden. Wars were fought between soldiers, not against helpless people trying to survive. "Captain Morrison," she said into her communicator, "are you seeing this?" "Yes, Admiral," came Morrison's voice from the UES Titan. "It's not warfare, it's butchery." "Captain Rivera, Captain Phillips, give me a tactical assessment." Captain Tony Rivera, from the UES Ranger, was the first to respond. "Admiral, they have us outnumbered 4-1, but their formation is sloppy. They're spread thin, trying to cover the entire planet. Their ships are also older designs," Captain Kate Phillips added from the UES Thunder. "Heavy armor, but limited. Maneuverability. They're built for intimidation, not real combat." Blake nodded. The Korthak Empire had grown powerful by conquering peaceful species who couldn't fight back. They had never faced an enemy that would shoot back with equal force. "Dr. Walsh," Blake called to her science officer, "can you establish communication with the Zelani survivors?" "Working on it now, Admiral," Dr. Peter Walsh replied. "I'm getting a response from someone called Kivith." The alien voice came through the ship's translators, shaky with fear and exhaustion. "Unknown vessels, this is Kivith of the Zelani Science Council. Are you the humans who answered our call for help?" "This is Admiral Blake of the Earth Defense Fleet," Blake responded. "We're here to assist you." There was a long pause before Kivith spoke again. "Admiral, forgive me, but your ships register energy signatures that our sensors cannot fully analyze. What kind of weapons do you carry?" Blake exchanged glances with her officers. How could she explain human military technology to a species that had never built weapons? "We carry what we need to stop the Korthak attacks," she said simply. "But the power readings," Kivith's voice trembled. "They suggest your weapons could destroy entire continents." "If necessary," Blake said. She didn't understand why this seemed to shock the alien. Of course their weapons were powerful. How else could they protect innocent people from enemies like the Korthak? On the surface of Zelos Prime, Kivith stared at his communication equipment in growing horror. The human spoke of continental destruction as calmly as he would discuss the weather. What kind of species carried such terrible power? "Kivith," Elder Vextar approached the communication station. "What do our rescuers say?" "Elder," Kivith whispered, "I think we may have called upon demons to save us from monsters." Meanwhile, aboard the Korthak flagship, Fleet Commander Vorthak was discovering that his sensors were giving him impossible readings. "This cannot be correct," he said, staring at the tactical display. "No ship that size can carry antimatter torpedoes of that yield." "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "their smallest escort vessels are showing firepower equivalent to our heavy cruisers. Their main battleships register as planet killers." "Impossible," Vorthak repeated. "What species builds ships like that? What do they need such weapons for?" He was about to find out. The human fleet had finished their approach and was now requesting communication. "This is Admiral Blake of the human fleet," came the alien voice. "You have attacked a peaceful world and murdered innocent civilians. You will cease your bombardment immediately and withdraw from this system." Vorthak felt his blood rise. No one gave orders to the Korthak Empire. "Unknown Admiral," he replied, "you are interfering with a lawful conquest. These worlds now belong to the Empire. Leave now or share their fate." "Commander," Blake's voice came back immediately. "Let me be very clear. You have 30 minutes to stop attacking civilians and begin withdrawing your forces. If you do not comply, we will consider you a hostile force and respond accordingly." Vorthak laughed. "You threaten me with 50 ships against my fleet of 200? Human, your species is either very brave or very stupid." "Sometimes," Blake replied. "Those are the same thing." Dr. Walsh had been monitoring Korthak communications throughout the exchange. What he discovered made him pale. "Admiral," he said quietly, "they don't understand what they're facing. Their military doctrine assumes all species fight the same way they do." "What do you mean?" "They've never encountered a species that prioritizes civilian protection over territorial gain. They think war is about conquest and slavery. The idea of fighting just to stop suffering doesn't exist in their culture." Blake thought about this. Humans had fought countless wars throughout their history, but even in the darkest times there had been rules. Soldiers fought soldiers. Civilians were to be protected when possible. Prisoners were treated with basic dignity. The Korthak seemed to have no such concepts. "Captain Morrison," she said into her communicator, "are you ready?" "All weapons charged and ready, Admiral," Morrison replied. "Targeting solutions locked on priority targets." "Captain Rivera, Captain Phillips?" "Standing by," they both answered. Blake looked out at the enemy fleet. 200 ships that had spent years terrorizing peaceful worlds, confident that no one would ever challenge them. Today they would learn what happened when someone finally did. "Colonel Turner," she called to the Marine commander, "are your boarding parties ready?" "Ready and waiting, Admiral," came Turner's voice. "My Marines are eager to show these aliens how humans feel about people who hurt innocents." Blake noticed that several of her bridge officers were smiling grimly. They had trained their entire careers for moments like this. Not for conquest or glory, but for the chance to stand between evil and those who couldn't protect themselves. "Attention all ships," Blake announced. "The enemy has refused to withdraw. As of now, we are at war. Remember, our job is to protect the Zelani people and stop the attacks on civilians. Make every shot count." Across the human fleet, weapons systems came online. Antimatter torpedoes loaded into launch tubes. Particle beam arrays charged to full power. point defense systems activated to protect against return fire. The Korthak had no idea that they were facing beings evolved on a world where survival required constant vigilance against predators, natural disasters, and resource scarcity. They had never met a species that considered violence a tool to be used precisely and effectively when diplomacy failed. They were about to receive a lesson in why the galaxy would soon whisper in fear about the humans from the death world called Earth. "All ships," Admiral Blake said calmly. "Engage at will." The first human weapons fired, and the balance of power in the galaxy changed forever. The first shot of the battle came from a Korthak patrol ship that fired on the UES Ranger's scout probe. The plasma bolt harmlessly scattered against the probe's shields, but it was enough to declare hostile intent. Captain Morrison's response was immediate and devastating. The UES Titan's main guns fired once, and the Korthak heavy cruiser simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was expanding gas and metal fragments. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. "All ships, Admiral." Blake's voice cut through the communication channels. "Weapons free, protect the civilians." What happened next would be talked about in taverns and war colleges across the galaxy for generations to come. The human ships moved like nothing the Korthak had ever seen. Instead of forming orderly battle lines like civilized species, they scattered in all directions, attacking from impossible angles. Captain Rivera took his destroyer squadron straight down. Diving below the plane of battle where no sane commander would go, the Korthak ships, designed to fight in neat formations, couldn't adjust their weapons fast enough to track targets moving in 3 dimensions. "Target their bombardment platforms first," Rivera ordered his squadron. "Those civilians have suffered. Enough." The human destroyers swept through the Korthak orbital bombardment ships like sharks through a school of fish. Each human vessel carried more firepower than most species put on their largest battleships. The bombardment platforms built for attacking helpless planets had no defense against real warships. Within minutes, the rain of fire on Zelos Prime stopped for the first time in days. On the surface, Elder Vextar watched the sky in amazement as the red glow of bombardment beams faded away. Through his communicator, he could hear Kivith providing updates from the science station. "The human ships move like living things," Kivith reported, his voice full of wonder and terror. "They do not follow any pattern our computers can predict. It is as if each ship thinks for itself." Above them, Captain Phillips demonstrated exactly what Kivith meant. The UES Thunder accelerated directly toward a cluster of 20 Korthak ships, ignoring the plasma fire that washed harmlessly over her shields. At the last moment, she spun her ship 90 degrees and fired her entire broadside into the enemy formation. 6 Korthak ships died in that single pass. "Phillips, you're insane," Captain Rivera's voice came over the comm. But he was laughing. "Insane. Works," Phillips replied as she swung around for another attack run. "These aliens fight like they're in a parade, not a battle." She was right. The Korthak fleet had been trained to fight other galactic species, who followed the established rules of space combat. Ships formed lines, fired at long range, and maneuvered slowly to avoid damage. It was civilized warfare for civilized species. The humans fought like wild animals. They used asteroid fields for cover, executed suicide runs that would terrify normal crews, and seemed to treat the vacuum of space like their natural environment. Aboard the Korthak flagship, Fleet Commander Vorthak watched his tactical display with growing horror. In 10 minutes of fighting, he had lost 30 ships. The humans had lost nothing. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Their ships should not be able to move like that. The gravitational forces alone should kill their crews." His science officer checked the readings again. "Sir, I believe their ships have artificial gravity systems far beyond ours. But more than that, their crews seem to withstand acceleration that would crush most species." Vorthak stared at the display as another group of his ships disappeared under human fire. What kind of world creates beings like this, he was about to find out. Colonel Turner's marine assault shuttles had launched from the human fleet and were heading for disabled Korthak ships. The Korthak expected boarding parties to follow standard galactic protocol: formal surrender demands, careful entry procedures, minimal violence. Staff Sergeant Nicole Ward kicked down the airlock door of a Korthak cruiser and led her squad inside at a full run. The Korthak defenders, already shaken by the space battle, found themselves facing humans in combat armor who moved faster and hit harder than should be possible. "Surrender now," Ward shouted in translated Korthak, "and you will be treated as prisoners of war." The Korthak soldiers tried to fight. Their plasma rifles were powerful weapons deadly to most galactic species, but the human Marines shrugged off hits that would kill others and kept coming. Private Ben Clark took a plasma bolt to the chest, cursed creatively, and returned fire with his assault rifle. The Korthak soldier who shot him simply disintegrated. "Ward," Clark said, checking his armor readout. "These aliens hit like children. My armor barely registered that shot." "Focus, Clark," Ward replied, but she had noticed the same thing. The Korthak were strong compared to peaceful species like the Zilani, but compared to humans who had evolved climbing mountains and surviving predators, they were fragile. Within minutes, the boarding action was over. The surviving Korthak crew sat in shocked silence as human Marines secured their ship. They had never imagined beings who could treat space combat and boarding actions as routine activities. Back in the main battle, Admiral Blake was coordinating her fleet's assault with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. Each captain knew their role, but they also had the freedom to adapt and improvise as the situation changed. "Morrison, take your group and hit their command ships," she ordered. "Rivera, keep hitting their flanks. Phillips, I need you to break through their center line." "Admiral," Dr. Walsh called from his station, "I'm monitoring Korthak communications. They're panicking. They keep asking their home fleet for instructions on how to fight Deathworlders." "Deathworlders?" Blake repeated. "That's what they're calling us, Admiral. Apparently in galactic terminology, Earth would be classified as a death world, a planet so dangerous that any species evolving there would be considered extremely hazardous." Blake thought about this as she watched another wave of Korthak ships fall to human weapons. Earth was dangerous, she supposed. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, poisonous animals, diseases, and predators. But that was just normal life. Every human child learned to deal with danger as a basic survival skill. She was beginning to understand why the galaxy seemed so shocked by human capabilities. Most species had evolved on gentler worlds where survival didn't require constant vigilance and adaptability. "Admiral," Captain Morrison's voice interrupted her thoughts. "The Korthak are trying to retreat. Should we pursue?" Blake looked at her tactical display. Half the Korthak fleet was destroyed or disabled. The rest were fleeing toward the edge of the system in disorder. "Let them go," she said. "Our mission was to protect the Zilani, not conquer the Korthak Empire." "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Clark said, "some of the retreating ships are firing on refugee transports." Blake's expression turned cold. "Correction. Stop any ship that fires on civilians. The rest can leave." The human fleet adjusted its pursuit, carefully distinguishing between ships that were retreating and ships that were still committing war crimes. It was a level of precision and moral discrimination that amazed both the fleeing Korthak and the rescued Zilani. Within an hour, the battle was over. The most powerful fleet in this sector of the galaxy had been defeated by 50 human ships. But more importantly to the humans, the civilians on Zelos Prime were safe. As the last Korthak ship fled into hyperspace, Admiral Blake opened a channel to the planet below. "Elder Vextar," she said, "this is Admiral Blake. The immediate threat has been neutralized. How can we assist with rescue and recovery operations?" The response came slowly, as if the Zilani Elder was having trouble finding the right words. "Admiral Blake," Vextar finally said, "we are grateful beyond measure, but we must ask, what are you? What kind of beings carry such power and use it with such restraint?" Blake looked around her bridge at the human officers who had just fought their first interstellar battle. They looked tired but satisfied. They had done what they came to do. "We're just people," she said simply. "People who believe that bullies should be stopped and innocence should be protected." On Zelos Prime, Elder Vextar stared at his communicator and wondered if the galaxy would ever be the same. 3 days after the battle, the human fleet was still in orbit around Zelos Prime, but now they were helping instead of fighting. Medical ships had arrived from Earth, bringing doctors and supplies. Engineer teams worked around the clock to repair the damage from the Korthak bombardment. Chief Maria Santos stood in the ruins of what had once been Zelos Prime's main hospital, directing human repair crews and trying to understand Zelani medical equipment. The aliens had advanced technology, but they had never needed to build things that could survive bombing. "The power grid is completely destroyed," she reported to Captain Morrison over her communicator. "We're going to have to rebuild it from scratch." "How long?" Morrison asked. "With human equipment?" 3 weeks. With their equipment? 3 months if we're lucky. Santos shook her head as she watched a Zelani engineer try to lift a piece of debris that weighed maybe 20 pounds. The alien struggled with both arms, finally giving up and calling for help. A human soldier walking by picked up the same piece of metal with one hand and tossed it into a pile. The Zelani engineer stared at the human in amazement, then scurried away quickly. Similar scenes were playing out all over the planet. Human. Marines were unloading supply ships, carrying containers that required heavy machinery for other species to move. Human doctors were working 18-hour shifts in conditions that would exhaust most galactic species after a few hours. Dr. Amy Foster was having her own challenges in the temporary command center that had been set up in the ruins of the Zelani Council building. She was trying to coordinate relief efforts with Elder Vextar, but the cultural differences kept getting in the way. "Elder?" she said patiently. "We need to prioritize the repair list. What's most important?" Vextar looked at the list of damaged facilities with obvious distress. "All of it is important, Dr. Foster. The food distribution centers, the schools, the art galleries, the meditation gardens. But if you had to choose," Foster pressed, "what would save the most lives?" "Save lives?" Vexatar repeated the phrase as if it made no sense. "But all life is precious. How can we choose which lives matter more?" Foster realized that she was dealing with a species that had never had to make hard choices about survival. The Zelani had lived in peace for so long that concepts like triage and priority were foreign to them. "Let me put it another way," she said. "Which facilities help keep people alive? Food, water, medical care, shelter?" "Oh," Vextar said, understanding finally. "You mean survival priorities. Yes, that makes sense." Meanwhile, in orbit, Admiral Blake was dealing with an entirely different problem. The news of the battle had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Her communication officer was being flooded with messages from species she had never heard of. "Admiral, Lieutenant," Commander Clark reported, "we're receiving diplomatic overtures from 17 different civilizations. They all want to meet with us." "What kind of overtures?" "Everything from trade agreements to military alliances to—" Clark paused. "Surrender offers." "Surrender offers?" "Yes, ma'am. 3 different species are offering to submit to human rule, rather than risk military conflict." Blake rubbed her forehead. This was getting complicated fast. All they had wanted to do was help some refugees, and now half the galaxy thought humans were planning to conquer everyone. "Any word from the Korthak Empire?" "Actually, yes," Clark said, pulling up another message. "Their high command wants to negotiate a peace treaty. They're offering to pay reparations to the Zelani and withdraw from this entire sector of space." Lo stared at the message. The Korthak Empire, which had been terrorizing peaceful species for decades, was ready to surrender after one battle. "Ma'am," Dr. Walsh added from his station, "I've been monitoring galactic news networks. They're calling us the Death World Fleet and speculating about human military capabilities. Some are saying we must have fleets of thousands of ships waiting to invade." "How many ships do they think we have?" Blake asked. "Conservative estimates are around 10,000 vessels. The higher estimates go into the millions." Blake almost laughed. The entire Earth defense fleet consisted of maybe 200 ships, and most of those were patrol vessels. But she was beginning to understand that the galaxy operated on very different assumptions about military power. Down on the planet's surface, Colonel Turner was learning the same lesson. He was meeting with surviving Zelani security forces, trying to help them prepare for the possibility of future attacks. "Colonel," the Zelani security chief Rixtar said nervously, "your Marines move very strangely. They do not seem to follow our combat doctrines." What combat doctrines? Turner asked. I thought you said your people were peaceful. We are, Rickstar replied. But we have studied galactic military theory. In proper warfare, soldiers advance slowly, take cover frequently, and avoid unnecessary risks. Turner watched his Marines working nearby. Staff Sergeant Ward was teaching a group of young Zilani how to clear debris from collapsed buildings. She was moving heavy stones that would require machinery for the aliens to handle, and she was doing it while wearing full combat armor in conditions that would exhaust most galactic species. Sergeant Ward, Turner called. How long have you been working today? About 14 hours, sir, Ward replied without stopping her work. Planning to work another 6 before my shift ends. Turner turned back to Rickstar. 20-hour shifts are normal for human Marines. We train in environments that would kill most species. We're not trying to be different from galactic military doctrine. We just evolved differently. Rickstar stared at the human Marines in growing understanding. Your people are built for survival on a world that wanted to kill you. Every day, Turner agreed. Earth has predators, natural disasters, diseases, and weather that can kill you if you're not careful. Every human child learns to deal with danger as part of growing up. And now you bring those skills to space, Rickstar said quietly. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Ben Clark was discovering just how different human technology was from galactic standards. He was working with Kivith to integrate human and Zilani computer systems, and the results were surprising. Your computers are very strange, Kivith said as he studied human code. They seem designed to function even when damaged. Of course, Clark replied. What if you need them during an emergency? But why would computers be damaged during normal operation? Clark thought about all the times his equipment had been hit by enemy fire, damaged by radiation, or exposed to extreme conditions. Because the universe is dangerous, equipment breaks. You need backups for your backups. Kivith nodded slowly. You build everything as if you expect it to be attacked. We build everything as if we expect it to be tested, Clark corrected. Because it will be. As the days passed, both species were learning from each other. The Zilani were amazed by human endurance, adaptability, and casual acceptance of risk. The humans were impressed by Zilani knowledge, creativity, and dedication to peace. But across the galaxy, other species were drawing their own conclusions about humanity. Some saw them as potential allies against aggressive empires like the Korthak. Others saw them as a threat that needed to be contained before it could spread. Admiral Blake was about to discover that saving one species had introduced humanity to a galaxy that wasn't sure whether to welcome them or fear them. And some civilizations were already deciding that fear was the safer choice. The next phase of humanity's introduction to galactic civilization was about to begin, and it would be far more complicated than a simple military battle. 6 months after the battle, Commander Ryan Hayes stood in the newly built Earth Embassy on Zelos Prime, reading reports that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. Humanity's first contact with alien species had changed everything, not just for Earth but for the entire galaxy. The Korthak Empire has withdrawn from 12 star systems, he told Admiral Blake during their weekly conference call. They're calling it a strategic repositioning, but intelligence reports suggest they're terrified of encountering more human fleets. Blake nodded from her position aboard the UES Guardian, now permanently stationed in the Zelos system. What about the other species? Mixed reactions, Hayes replied. The Peaceful Coalition wants to invite Earth to join their alliance. The Merchant Federation is offering exclusive trade deals, but the warrior clans are talking about something they call a preemptive response to the Death World threat. Neither human understood that across the galaxy, ancient civilizations were holding emergency meetings about what to do with the newcomers from Earth. Species that had known peace for millennia were suddenly building weapons. Others were seeking protection from the humans themselves. On Earth, President Helen Carter was dealing with her own complications. The revelation that humanity was not alone in the universe had changed everything. Some nations wanted to build massive fleets to explore the galaxy. Others demanded that Earth remain isolated to avoid galactic conflicts. Madam President, General Frank Miller said during the latest security briefing. "We're receiving more requests for military assistance. The Zilani situation has made us famous, but not in the way we expected." "How many requests?" Carter asked. 47 in the last month. Species being attacked by aggressive neighbors, planets under siege, refugees fleeing war zones. They all want the human fleet to help them. Carter looked at the star map on her wall, showing the location of every species that had contacted Earth. "We can't fight everyone's battles for them." "No, ma'am. But we can't ignore genocide either." Meanwhile, on Zelos Prime, the cultural exchange between humans and Zilani continued to produce surprising results. Dr. Amy Foster was working with Zilani scientists to understand how their peaceful society had developed, while the Zilani studied human history to understand how a species could be both violent and moral. "Your wars are very strange," Kiveth said as he studied human historical records. "You fight with terrible weapons, but you also try to protect innocent people. You destroy your enemies, but you rebuild their cities afterward." "That's just how war works," Foster replied. "You fight to win, but you try to minimize suffering." "But why do you fight at all?" Kiveth asked. "Could you not simply talk to your enemies?" Foster thought about how to explain human nature to a species that had never known conflict. Sometimes talking isn't enough. Sometimes someone decides they want what you have and they're willing to kill to get it. When that happens, you have to be ready to stop them. "And that is why you evolved to be so dangerous," Kiveth said, understanding finally. "Your world taught you that sometimes violence is necessary." "Violence is a tool," Foster agreed. "Like any tool, it can be used for good or evil. The important thing is knowing when and how to use it." In the embassy's security office, Colonel Dewam Turner was training the 1st Zilani Defense Force. The peaceful aliens were terrible at combat, but they were learning. More importantly, they were learning why sometimes combat was necessary. "Colonel," young Rixtar said after a training session, "I understand now why other species fear you. You make war seem like a normal part of life." "It is a normal part of life," Turner replied. "The universe is full of predators. Some hunt for food, some hunt for territory, some hunt for sport. If you can't defend yourself, you become prey. But you also protect those who cannot defend themselves," Rixtar observed. "That's what makes us different from the predators," Turner said. "We're strong enough to hurt people, but we choose to help them instead." Back in space, Admiral Blake was monitoring galactic communications when she received an unexpected message. It came from the Galactic Council, an organization humans had only recently learned existed. "This is Counselor Thexaron of the Galactic Council," the translated message began. "We request an immediate meeting with human representatives to discuss your species' integration into galactic civilization." Blake forwarded the message to Earth and received her orders within hours. President Carter had decided that humanity needed to take its place in galactic politics, whether the galaxy was ready or not. The meeting took place on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, the galactic capital. Admiral Blake, Commander Hayes, and Dr. Foster represented humanity. Across the table sat representatives from 27 different species, all of them nervous about meeting the Death Worlders face to face. "Humans," Counselor Thexron began, "your intervention in the Zelos system has created significant changes in galactic politics. We need to discuss how your species fits into our established order." "What kind of order?" Blake asked. "For thousands of years we have maintained peace through careful diplomacy and mutual agreement. Violence is used only as a last resort and then only with council approval." "That sounds reasonable," Hayes said. "What's the problem?" "The problem," another counselor interjected, "is that your species doesn't seem to understand the concept of proportional response. You responded to a local conflict with weapons capable of destroying planets." Blake exchanged glances with her companions. The alien still didn't understand that humans had shown remarkable restraint during the battle. "Counselor," she said carefully, "we use the minimum force necessary to stop attacks on civilians. Our weapons are designed to end conflicts quickly, which actually reduces total casualties. But the psychological impact," Thexaran replied, "has been enormous. Half the galaxy now fears human retaliation for any aggressive action. The other half wants to hire you as mercenaries. Dr. Foster leaned forward. What exactly are you asking us to do? We want you to register your military capabilities with the Council and agree to use them only with our approval. The room fell silent. Blake looked at the alien counselors and realized that they were trying to control humanity before it could become a threat to their established order. I'm afraid that's impossible, she said finally. We can't promise to ignore suffering just because it might upset galactic politics. Then you leave us no choice but to consider you a rogue element, Thexrin said. That's your decision, Blake replied. But understand this. Humanity will defend innocent people whether you approve or not. We'll work with you when possible. But we won't abandon our principles for political convenience. The meeting ended in deadlock, but it established something important. Humanity had announced its position in galactic civilization. They would be the species that others could count on when the established order failed to protect the innocent. 3 months later, Commander Hayes opened Earth's first permanent embassy on Nexus Prime. The building was designed to human standards, which meant it could withstand attacks that would destroy most galactic structures. The message was subtle but clear. Humans were here to stay. President Carter's final decision came after months of debate. Earth would engage with galactic civilization, but on human terms. They would defend their principles, protect their allies, and show the galaxy what it meant to be strong enough to help others. As Hayes raised the flag of Earth over the embassy, he thought about how much had changed since that first distress call from Zelos Prime. Humanity had revealed itself to the galaxy, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what that meant. Across the stars, some species slept easier, knowing that the humans were watching for threats. Others lay awake wondering if the Deathworlders would someday turn their attention to them. But in the embassy on Nexus Prime, in the rebuilt cities of Zelos Prime, and in the halls of power on Earth, humans continued to do what they had always done. They made the hard choices, protected those who couldn't protect themselves, and tried to make the universe a little bit better than they found it. The galaxy was learning that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their unwavering belief that someone had to stand up for what was right, even when it was dangerous, even when it was costly, and even when the rest of the galaxy thought they were crazy for trying. And maybe the aliens were beginning to realize that was exactly the kind of crazy the universe needed.